I woke up to silence. That's right, not the sounds, but the absence of them. When you live alone in a big house where voices used to be, the silence is so dense that it sometimes jolts you out of sleep better than any alarm clock. My gaze slid to the empty half of the bed out of habit. 20 months had passed, and I still expected to see Miriam there. I rose slowly, feeling the familiar morning stiffness in my joints. 77 isn't the age when you roll out of bed ready to move mountains. Although many people my age have long been unable to get up on their own, I can't complain. My engineering education and construction business taught me two things: to build strong structures and to maintain them. I considered my body the same way. Walking down to the first floor of the villa, I brewed myself a strong cup of coffee, one of the few habits I wasn't about to give up despite the doctor's recommendations. At your age, Mr. Burroughs, you should switch to herbal teas. Nonsense. What good is a long life if you start every morning with compromises? I stepped out onto the terrace with my cup, glancing around my property. The villa stood on a small hill on the outskirts of Toledo, overlooking the city. Miriam and I had once dreamed of a place like this, and when my company started to make a serious profit, I bought the land and designed the house myself. 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room with panoramic windows, a study, a terrace. Everything is planned down to the smallest detail. Miriam had taken care of the garden. Now it was being taken care of by a gardener, but it wasn't the same. The phone beeped with a new message. Vivian, my only daughter. Dad, Neil and I will stop by on Sunday around 4. We need to talk about something. No, how are you? Or good morning. Always to the point. I smiled bitterly. I guess she'd taken after me in that. I'd never been a master of small talk either. The only difference was that I had always tried to tone down my bluntness, at least with those close to me. Vivian, on the other hand, seemed to think it unnecessary to show warmth toward me. I replied with a short, "Okay, I'll be waiting," and put the phone away. To discuss something. Sure. In recent years, our conversations had revolved around 3 topics: my health, a formal interest; their plans, which required my approval or, more often, financial support; and my big empty house where you're all alone, Dad. The latter was particularly annoying. Since Miriam's death, Vivian had begun persistently suggesting that I sell the villa. You need something smaller, Dad. Maybe an apartment near us. She never said it directly, but I understood perfectly. Vivian was counting on the money from the sale. The villa had gone up in value considerably over the years, and she and Neil had a daughter growing up who would soon need to pay for college. I sighed and went back into the house. The dishwasher had finished its cycle, and I started putting the plates back in their places. Miriam always laughed at my pedantry. Every single thing in the house had its strictly defined place. Roger, you design our kitchen like a blueprint for a bridge. Well, this habit now helped structure my days. Time flows differently in solitude. With 2 days to go before Vivian and Neil arrived, they stretched out in front of me like a desert. Weekends used to be filled with things to do: working in the garden with Miriam, trips into town, sometimes seeing friends. Now many friends are gone, some from life, some to nursing homes, and some have simply parted ways. On Saturday, I decided to clear my head a bit and drove downtown. A small bookstore on Maple Street was one of the few places I still felt comfortable. The owner, Hamish Wiltshire, was a little younger than me and shared my love of historical biographies. Roger. He greeted me, taking a break from arranging the books. I was just thinking about you. The new biography of Brunel has arrived. Put it aside for me. I nodded, walking between the shelves. How's Vivian? Hamish asked as I approached the register with a couple of books. She's coming in on Sunday, I answered neutrally. Hamish nodded understandingly. He was one of the few people who knew about the difficulties in our relationship. Give her my regards, he said, handing me a bag of books. Sunday came too quickly and not soon enough at the same time. I made lunch, baked chicken and vegetables, one of the few recipes I'd mastered since Miriam's death. Set the table in the dining room, even though I knew Vivian would prefer to eat in the kitchen. Why all the formalities, Dad? But some things I wasn't going to change. At exactly 4 o'clock there was the sound of a car pulling up. They were always punctual, I'll give them that. I met them at the door. Daddy. Vivian kissed my cheek, barely touching my lips. You look good. A standard phrase, uttered without much interest while her eyes were already assessing the situation in the house. What had changed? What could I sell or throw away? Hello, Roger. Neil shook my hand. Always on a first-name basis, always with that polite detachment, as if I were not his wife's father but a business partner. Come in. Lunch is ready, I said, leading them into the dining room. At the table, as usual, we didn't have much conversation. I asked about my granddaughter, my only granddaughter, by the way. Olivia's fine, Vivian said. She's getting ready to enroll. That's what we wanted to talk to you about. There it is. The real reason for the visit. About getting in? Yeah, Neil interjected. We're thinking about Princeton. It's a great choice in terms of a future career. I nodded. Princeton, one of the most expensive universities in the country. What does Olivia think? I asked. Vivian and Neil looked at each other. She hadn't made up her mind yet, Vivian said, but Daniel thinks that Princeton would open all the doors for her. Daniel, Neil's father, former economics professor and apparently the Fenton family's supreme advisor on all matters. Daniel? I couldn't help the irony in my voice. What did Olivia herself think? Dad, Vivian frowned. She's 16. She doesn't know what's best for her yet. You were 16 when you said you wanted to study psychology instead of engineering like I suggested, I reminded her. And I supported you. That's different. Vivian cut her off. Times have changed. There's a lot more competition now. I decided not to argue. Neil, obviously sensing the tension, changed the subject. By the way, Daniel is inviting us all to dinner next Friday. It's his 70th birthday. You'll come, won't you, Roger? The invitation was unexpected. Daniel Fenton had never been much for socializing with me. Our rare meetings at family gatherings were usually limited to a formal exchange of pleasantries. Of course, I replied, hiding my surprise. It would be my pleasure. Great, Neil glowed. It'll be a small group, just the closest people. We finished lunch and Vivian, as usual, offered to help with the dishes. I knew the ritual. She would load the dishwasher and simultaneously make remarks about how the cabinets needed updating and the appliances were outdated. Daddy, have you thought about remodeling the kitchen? She began, neatly arranging the plates. These cabinets look so archaic. They function just fine, I replied. Why change something that works? Vivian rolled her eyes as if she were a teenager. It's not just about functionality. Daniel had recently remodeled his kitchen and it was amazing. Modern design, smart appliances. Vivian, I interrupted her. I've been building homes and offices for 35 years. Believe me, I know more about functionality and design than an economics professor. She pressed her lips together. Dad, don't get me started. Daniel is just better at keeping up with current trends. He's constantly updating his knowledge. I remained silent. Arguing with Vivian about the merits of her father-in-law was useless. Since she'd married Neil 15 years ago, Daniel Fenton had become an unquestioned authority. Despite the fact that I had built a successful company from scratch and provided her with a trouble-free childhood and education, my opinions and advice had always been regarded with skepticism. Daniel, on the other hand, with his academic regalia and refined manners, was her model of wisdom. Neil joined us in the kitchen and the conversation turned to financial matters. Roger, he began cautiously, Vivian and I have been thinking, given the cost of tuition at Princeton, it might make sense to review some assets. What kind of assets? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Well, This house, for instance. Neil pointed to the kitchen. It's too big for one person, and the proceeds from the sale could— Neil, I interrupted. I'm not going to sell the house. Dad, Vivian interjected, be reasonable. You're 77. Keeping a house that big is stressful and expensive. I'm doing just fine, I replied, both financially and physically. But why do you need so much space? Vivian waved her hand irritably. You only use the bedroom, the kitchen, and the living room. The rest is just empty. I took a deep breath. This house is my home. I designed it. I built it, and I will stay here as long as I want to. That was the end of the subject, but I saw Vivian and Neil exchange glances. That wasn't all. After lunch, we moved to the living room where Neil suddenly remembered that he wanted to show me an article on real estate investing. Daniel recommended it, he added, handing me the clipboard. He says the market is in the perfect position to sell large properties right now. I took the tablet but didn't read the article. Neil, I sold my company 10 years ago because I decided I'd had enough of business decisions. I want to spend the rest of my life not thinking about markets and investment strategies. But it's your money, Roger, Neil insisted. Don't you want to maximize its potential? I want to live peacefully in the house I love, I replied. That's enough. Vivian was clearly unhappy with the turn of the conversation. Dad, we just want to help. You're becoming inflexible. Maybe, I agreed. Age is such a privilege. They left around 6, leaving behind a feeling of dissatisfaction. I stood at the window, watching their car go around the corner, thinking about dinner at Daniel's. Maybe I shouldn't go, but no, it would look petty. Besides, I was curious. What made Daniel put me on the closest list? Friday came faster than I expected. I put on my best suit, a navy blue one from Miriam's Lifetime, and ordered a cab to Daniel's house. He lived in the upscale Toledo neighborhood, in a modern house that Vivian said was a model of elegant minimalism. Personally, I found it cold and impersonal, like a hotel room. Vivian met me at the entrance, clearly nervous. Dad, you're just in time. She looked at my suit appraisingly. You could have worn something more modern. This suit is Brooks Brothers, I replied. The classics never go out of style. She sighed and led me into the living room where the guests were already gathered, about 10 people, mostly Daniel's peers, but some young faces too, including my granddaughter Olivia, who nodded politely to me from the corner of the room, still on the phone. Daniel, a tall, gray-haired man with impeccable posture, approached me with a glass of champagne. Roger, glad you could make it. His handshake was firm but impersonal. I hope you like Italian food. I hired a chef from Bellissimo's. I love spaghetti and meatballs, I replied with an innocent smile, knowing that mentioning such a simple dish would make him cringe. Daniel didn't disappoint, a slight grimace sliding across his face before he got a hold of himself. Well, I'm sure you'll discover something more exquisite. Dinner was served in the dining room, where seats were marked with elegant cards. I was seated between an elderly lady who was introduced as Daniel's former university colleague and a middle-aged man I didn't know. Vivian and Neil sat next to Daniel in the center of the table. The dinner conversation revolved around economics, politics, and art, topics in which Daniel shone with his erudition. I was mostly silent, watching as Vivian and Neil caught his every word. Daniel, that's amazing, Vivian marveled after his monologue about contemporary art. You have such a deep understanding of cultural contexts. Yes, amazing analysis, Neil echoed her. Father, you should write these thoughts down. I watched this scene feeling completely invisible. My daughter, who had never shown such enthusiasm for my accomplishments or knowledge, was glowing with every word from her father-in-law. Am I really that uninteresting or undereducated in her eyes? What do you think, Roger? Daniel suddenly turned to me when the conversation turned to the renovation of Toledo's historic center. All eyes turned to me, and I felt suddenly nervous as if I were in an exam. I think a lot of modern architects are too obsessed with form at the expense of function, I replied. Beautiful buildings that are uncomfortable for people are a failure, not an achievement. That's an interesting point of view, Daniel smiled slightly. Though many would argue that form itself is function in the context of urban aesthetics. Aesthetics shouldn't come at the expense of practicality, I objected. A building that looks like a work of art but leaks when it rains is just an expensive mistake. Papa has always been very practical, Vivian interjected with an apologetic smile. Engineering, you understand. Of course, Daniel nodded indulgently. There's value in that. But I've always believed that real culture requires the ability to go beyond purely utilitarian thinking. Several of the guests nodded approvingly, and the conversation turned to other topics. I was left with the strange feeling of having just been patted on the head, like a child who had said something naive. After dinner, as the guests scattered around the living room with their glasses, Daniel approached me again. "Roger, Neil tells me you don't want to sell your house," he began without preamble. "That's right," I confirmed. "It's my house, and I intend to stay there." Daniel nodded understandingly. "I respect your attachment to a place, but sometimes we have to think about the future, about the inheritance we leave to our children." "Inheritance?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or the heirs? Isn't that the same thing?" He smiled. "Vivian is your only daughter. Naturally, you want to secure her future." "I have secured her future by paying for her education and helping her over the years," I replied. "Now I'm thinking about my own future." Daniel frowned slightly. "Roger, don't take this the wrong way, but at your age, a big house can be a burden." "I can handle it," I cut him off. "Sure, for now," he agreed. "But what about a year from now? 2 years from now? Better to make a decision while you're in complete control of the situation." I realized what he was getting at. Daniel was trying to convince me to sell the house while I was still legally capable of signing the papers, until I needed guardianship. A wave of anger came over me, but I held it back. "Thank you for your concern, Daniel," I said dryly. "But I'm perfectly capable of determining when the time is right for such decisions." He nodded, but I could see in his eyes that the conversation wasn't over, just postponed. The evening ended with a toast in honor of the birthday boy, after which I hailed a cab, citing fatigue. Vivian walked me to the door. "Daddy, you're leaving so early?" She sounded annoyed. "We haven't served the cake yet." "I'm tired, Vivian," I answered honestly. "And frankly, I'm not particularly comfortable here." "Why not?" She seemed genuinely surprised. Daniel was trying so hard to create a pleasant atmosphere. All his friends are such interesting people. "I'm glad you enjoy your father-in-law's company," I said, "but it's not my circle." Vivian sighed. "That's why I'm saying you need to broaden your horizons. Daniel could teach you a lot." I looked at my daughter, trying to figure out when and how she started to think that a 77-year-old man who had built a successful business and life needed lessons from her father-in-law. "Good night, Vivian," I said, and walked out without waiting for an answer. On the way home, I reflected on the evening. Daniel, Vivian, Neil, they all seemed united in a mission to rescue me from my own home. But why? Was it just because of the money? Or was it about something else? Was it about control, a desire to decide for me? When I got home, I stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the familiar walls that held the memory of happy years with Miriam. No, I wasn't going to give up my home, but maybe I should have thought about how to protect myself from the growing pressure. A week passed after that unfortunate dinner at Daniel's. I tried to put it out of my mind, but my thoughts kept returning to the way Vivian and Neil had looked at their wise mentor. There was an almost religious worship in their eyes, something I had never seen when they looked at me. Wednesday morning began as usual. Exercise, shower, breakfast. I planned to stop by Hamish's bookstore. He'd promised to set aside some new editions of architectural history for me. I had been reading more since Miriam's death, filling in the gaps in my education that I always felt around her, a graduate of the College of Art. On my way downtown, I decided to stop by the Morning Breeze Cafe, a small, cozy place with great espresso. It was Miriam and I's favorite Saturday brunch spot, and I still stopped by there, keeping up a little tradition. Parking nearby, I was on my way to the entrance when I noticed familiar figures through the cafe's panoramic window. Sitting at a table in the corner were Vivian, Neil, and Daniel Fenton. There were some papers in front of them, and all three of them were engaged in a serious conversation. Daniel was explaining something, gesturing vigorously, and Vivian and Neil were listening intently, nodding occasionally. I froze on the sidewalk. A strange feeling prickled somewhere under my ribs. Why are they meeting on a weekday? Why wasn't Vivian at work? And what papers were they scrutinizing so closely? I didn't want to look like a spy, but curiosity got the best of me. I walked into the cafe and pretended to notice them just now. "Vivian?" I called out as I approached their table. What a surprise! All three of them looked up. There was a look of surprise on their faces, and then awkwardness. Vivian quickly gathered the papers into a folder. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I could have asked the same thing, I smiled. "Shouldn't you be at work?" "It's my day off," she answered quickly. "Neil and I just met Daniel for coffee." "Roger?" Daniel stood up and shook my hand. "Nice surprise. Won't you join us?" I noticed Vivian cast a quick, worried glance at her father-in-law, but he didn't seem to notice. "I'd love to," I answered, pulling a chair over. An awkward silence hung around the table as the waitress took my order. I noticed Vivian tapping her fingers nervously on the file folder. "So, what were you two discussing?" I asked bluntly as the waitress stepped away. "Nothing much," Vivian answered too quickly. "Just, family stuff." "We've been consulting with Daniel about investments," Neil added. "He's giving us some advice." "Investments?" I raised an eyebrow. "In what field?" Daniel leaned back in his chair with a slight smile. "A little bit of everything. Real estate, stocks. Neil and Vivian want to diversify their portfolio." I nodded, feeling a prick of resentment. In all the years, Vivian had never once sought financial advice from me, even though I'd built a business from scratch and successfully sold it. Instead, they'd consulted an economics professor who, as far as I knew, had never run a real business. "And what were the recommendations?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Daniel thinks it's a good time to invest in real estate," Neil replied, "especially in developing areas." "And what neighborhood are you planning to invest in?" There was an awkward silence again. Vivian glanced at Neil, then at Daniel. "We haven't decided yet," she said finally. "We're exploring our options." My coffee arrived and I took a sip, watching the three of them. Something wasn't right here. Too much nervousness for a normal investment conversation. "You know, Dad," Vivian suddenly said with fake ease, "maybe you could join our discussion too. You have a background in real estate too, after all." "Of course," I smiled. "I'm always open to discussion. It's just strange that in all these years you've never once asked my opinion on financial matters." Vivian blushed. "Well, you've always been so busy, and then, after Mom, we didn't want to bother you." "Very thoughtful of you," I said, not hiding my sarcasm. "But now that you know I don't mind, I'll be happy to help." "Excellent," Daniel interjected with a diplomatic smile. "It's always good to have different points of view. Although, of course, the theory and practice of investing has changed considerably in the last decade." It was a subtle hint that my experience was outdated. I swallowed the indignation. "The basic principles remain the same," I observed. "Don't invest in something you don't understand. Don't chase quick profits. And remember that the most valuable asset is the land under the building, not the building itself." That's an interesting approach." Daniel smiled slightly, like a teacher listening to a student's naive opinion. although modern economic theory offers a more nuanced view. I felt myself boiling, but I held back. I shouldn't have made a scene. Probably, I agreed, but my principles brought me a good income, enough to pay for Vivian's private school and college education. Vivian wrinkled her nose. Dad, that was a long time ago. Yes, I agreed. Almost as long ago as the last time you asked my advice on something important. The atmosphere at the table became tense. Neil looked at his watch. We should go, he said, standing up. We still have a meeting at the bank. At the bank? I questioned. I thought it was your workday, Neil. Yeah, but, he hesitated. I took the day off. Family stuff, you understand. I nodded, even though I didn't understand. What kind of urgent family thing required a meeting with Daniel and a trip to the bank? They hurriedly said goodbye, and I was alone at the table with my coffee. Through the window, I watched them stop in the parking lot, talk briefly about something, and then Daniel headed for his car, and Vivian and Neil headed for theirs. Something was definitely going on behind me. I never made it to the bookstore. Instead, I drove home, mulling over the situation. An indefinable uneasiness was keeping me on my toes. I understood that Vivian and Neil had the right to consult with whomever they wanted, but I was hurt by their apparent preference for Daniel's opinion over my own. At home, I pulled out old photo albums, a habit I resorted to when I was feeling particularly lonely. Here was Vivian at 5 on my shoulders, laughing. Here she is at 12, proudly showing off her science project we did together all night. Here's the graduation from high school, where she hugs Miriam and me, beaming with happiness. When did everything change? When did I stop being a hero in my daughter's eyes and turn into a burden? Maybe it started when she went to college, or when she met Neil, or when Miriam got sick and I, consumed with caring for my wife, paid less attention to my daughter, or all of these things together. I closed the album and decided I needed to try and patch things up with Vivian, not because of money or inheritance, but because she was my only child. The next day I called her and invited her to lunch, just the two of us, without Neil. Dad, I'm on a very tight schedule, she began to refuse. Maybe in a couple weeks? Vivian, I said firmly, I want to talk to you. It's important. Something in my tone must have convinced her. Okay, she said after a pause. On Friday, I can spare an hour during my lunch break. We arranged to meet at a small restaurant near her office. I arrived early and took a table in the corner where it was quieter. Vivian was 15 minutes late. I'm sorry, she said, sitting down across from me. The meeting had gone on too long. That's okay, I smiled. It's good to see you. She looked tense. She ordered a salad and water, glancing at her watch. So, Dad, what did you want to talk about? I took a deep breath. Vivian, I think we've grown distant from each other. I want to fix that. She blinked, clearly not expecting this start. Dad, we see each other regularly. Once a month, I finished for her. Usually when you need something. It's not a relationship, Vivian. It's, business meetings. She pressed her lips together. I have a job, a family, commitments. I can't come more often. It's not about frequency, I explained. It's about quality. When we see each other, I feel like you're just doing your duty. That's not fair. She resented me. I'm trying to keep things going, but you're not taking any steps forward. What steps, Vivian? She looked away. You could be more open, taking advice, thinking about the future. You mean sell the house? Not only that, she sighed. Dad, you're stuck in the past. You refuse to change, to learn new things. And who am I supposed to emulate? Daniel? At the mention of her father-in-law, Vivian perked up. Daniel is an educated man with a broad outlook. He's always up on the latest trends, reading, traveling. Unlike me, I finished for her, a simple engineer who's done nothing but work all his life. I didn't say that, she frowned, but I implied it. I looked her straight in the eye. Vivian, I notice how you change around him. You become a different person. What nonsense. She started to get annoyed. I just respect his opinion. What about mine? She was silent, clearly not knowing what to say. Yours too, she said finally, but without conviction. It's just that Daniel is more knowledgeable about some things. Like finance? I asked. I happened to see the three of you at the cafe. It looked like you were discussing something important. Vivian tensed. It was just, investment plans. Nothing special. So unimportant that you took time off from work to keep this meeting from me? I don't have to report to you every step of the way. She flared up. I'm 39 years old, Dad. I'm a grown woman. Then why are you acting like a teenager who's hiding something? She pushed back the unfinished salad. You know what? This was a bad idea. I don't have time for interrogations. Vivian, I tried to soften my tone. I just want to understand what's going on. You and Neil are clearly planning something and it involves me or my assets. I have a right to know. We're not planning anything, she cut me off. And even if we were, it's our business. Neil and I should be thinking about Olivia's future, about her education. And you sit in your big, empty house and refuse to see reality. What reality? That you're getting old, Dad, she almost shouted it, then lowered her voice, noticing the stares from neighboring tables. You can't live alone in a house this big forever. Sooner or later you're going to need help. And you and Neil are certainly willing to give it to me, I said ironically, on the condition that I sell the house and give you the money. That's not fair, she shook her head. We want what's best for you. No, Vivian, I sighed tiredly. You want what's best for you, and that's fine, but at least be honest with yourself. She stood up, tossing her napkin on the table. I'm not going to listen to this. Call me when you're ready for a normal conversation. She walked away, leaving me alone with an unfinished lunch and the bitter realization that our attempt to get closer had only widened the chasm between us. On Sunday, while perusing the local newspaper, I came across an ad for an evening of classical music at the town theater. Miriam loved Chopin, and his second piano concerto was on the program. I decided to go. It was a way to honor her memory and unwind a little. Friday night, I put on my best suit and drove to the theater. The auditorium was almost full, mostly people my age, although there were a few young faces. I found my seat in the parterre and settled in, anticipating the music. As the lights began to dim, I noticed movement in the side aisle. To my surprise, I saw Daniel leading a group of people to their seats. Vivian and Neil were among them. They didn't notice me, taking seats a few rows ahead of me. During the concert, I couldn't help but watch them. Vivian sat between Neil and Daniel, occasionally leaning toward one or the other, clearly sharing her impressions. At intermission, they remained in their seats, chatting animatedly. I saw Vivian laughing at something Daniel had said, a sincere, open laugh that I hadn't heard her say to me in years. It was a month after that concert. I tried to call Vivian several times, but she either didn't answer or said she was very busy and would call back later. Of course, she didn't call back. I didn't insist. Trying to have a relationship with someone who doesn't want it is like trying to build a house on sand. Sooner or later, it's going to fall apart. Instead, I focused on my life. I started attending the local senior citizens club, where I played chess with other senior citizens. Signed up for a digital photography course. I'd always wanted to learn how to take pictures properly, but never had enough time. I even renewed my relationship with Edna Brighton, the widow of a longtime colleague of mine, with whom we sometimes went to the movies or concerts. Nothing serious, just a friendly companionship that we both missed. One sunny morning in early June, I decided to take a walk around the city center. The day promised to be hot, and I wanted to enjoy the coolness of the early morning. I left my car in the parking lot at the park and walked leisurely through the streets, watching the city wake up. As I passed the Prestige Motors dealership, I slowed down. There was a brand new Lexus in the window silver, sleek, and obviously expensive. I wasn't much of a car guy, preferring practicality to luxury, but even I could appreciate the beauty of this car. You like it? I heard a voice behind me and turned around. In front of me stood a man in his 40s in a business suit with a badge of a car dealership. Great choice. New model. Fresh off the assembly line. I smiled. Just looking. At my age, you don't need such powerful cars anymore. It's never too late to enjoy yourself, he smiled. I recently sold one just like it to a gentleman your age. He was delighted. Really? I politely joined the conversation. Then I'm not the only one who's crazy. The salesman laughed. Oh, that customer didn't buy it himself. It was a gift from his daughter-in-law and son. A very generous 70th birthday present, I'll tell you. I felt a strange chill. Do you remember the gentleman's name? We don't usually disclose customer information, the salesman began, but then shrugged. It was a very memorable case, though. Mr. Fenton, I think. Yes, that's right, Daniel Fenton. A very personable man, a professor if I'm not mistaken. It took my breath away. Daniel, daughter-in-law and son, 70th birthday. It all fit. Vivian and Neil bought Daniel a Lexus for his anniversary. Are you feeling okay, sir? The salesman asked worriedly. You're pale. I'm fine, I said. It's a little hot today. Why don't you come inside? We have air conditioning, water. No thanks. I took a step back. I gotta go. Have a good day. I left quickly, feeling a storm of emotions building up inside. Vivian and Neil bought Daniel a Lexus, an expensive brand new Lexus that must have cost at least $80,000. And these were the same people who, a month ago, had asked me for money for a down payment on a house because they didn't have enough money of their own. I was so shocked that I didn't even remember walking to the parking lot and getting into my car. My head was spinning with thoughts. How long had they been planning this gift? Surely it must have been one of those investments they'd discussed with Daniel at the cafe. And all this time they kept hinting that I should sell my house because it was too big and requires a lot of effort and attention. I reached the house in something of a fog. Upon entering, I went straight to the bar and poured myself a scotch, even though it was barely 11 in the morning. I needed to calm down to think about the situation. Maybe I'd gotten it all wrong. Maybe the salesman had gotten it wrong. But deep inside, I knew it was exactly as he said. It explained Vivian and Neil's strange behavior in recent months, their secret meetings with Daniel, their reluctance to let me in on their plans. I dialed Vivian's number, but the call went to voicemail. I left a short message. Call me back, it's important. She didn't call back until later that evening. Dad? What's wrong? I could hear the concern in her voice. I need to talk to you, I said. In person. I'm really busy this week, I said. Tomorrow, I interrupted. 6 o'clock at night. I'll wait for you at home. There was a pause. Okay, she said at last, but I'll only be able to stay for a little while. I spent a restless night replaying various scenarios of the upcoming conversation in my head. The next day dragged on endlessly. I tried to distract myself with work in the garden, but my thoughts kept returning to Vivian, Neil, and that damn Lexus. At 6 sharp, the doorbell rang. Vivian stood on the doorstep, wary and a little nervous. Hi, Daddy, she said, entering the house. What's so urgent? I led her into the living room and offered her tea, but she declined. I don't have much time, she reminded me. What did you want to talk about? I decided not to beat around the bush. You bought Daniel a Lexus for his birthday. Her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. How did you know that? Then it's true, I shook my head. I found out by accident from the salesman at the car dealership. He mentioned a professor who'd been given a car by his daughter-in-law and son for his 70th birthday. Vivian crossed her arms over her chest. So what of it? Neil and I have the right to use our money however we want. Of course, I agreed. I just wondered how you had enough money for Daniel's new Lexus, but not enough for a down payment on the house you wanted to buy for an investment. Her face flashed. Those are completely different things. The gift to Daniel was a special occasion. So special that you didn't see fit to mention it? We knew you wouldn't understand, she snapped. You've always been against unnecessary spending, as you call it. I'm not against spending, Vivian. I'm against hypocrisy. You come to me, asking me for money for a house while insinuating that I should sell mine, and at the same time you spend a huge amount of money on a gift for Daniel. Daniel deserves that gift, she blurted out. He's always supported us, always been there for us, given us advice. And I don't? I asked quietly. I haven't supported you? Didn't give advice? Wasn't there for you? Vivian looked away. This is different. Different how? I could feel the anger building up inside. Explain it to me, because I really don't understand. How Daniel deserved this gift and I didn't. She turned to me, and in her eyes I saw a coldness I'd never noticed before. You want to know the truth? All right. Daniel is an educated, cultured, sophisticated man. He's interested in art, literature, music. You can talk to him about anything, and he always knows more than you expect. He never judges, never criticizes, never pretends to know everything better than anyone else. Every word hit like a hammer. And me? I asked, feeling something inside me die. Who am I in your eyes? Vivian took a deep breath. You're a good man, Dad. You've worked hard, provided for us. But you've always been limited. Always thought that practicality trumps education, that money solves everything. You never understood why I wanted to study art history instead of engineering. You laughed at my useless interests. And even now you stubbornly cling to the past, to your home, to your outdated views, refusing to recognize that the world has changed. I listened in a daze, every word cut like a razor. Was this really how she'd seen me all these years? A limited, stubborn old man who couldn't understand her? I never made fun of your interests, I said quietly. I was concerned about your future. I wanted you to have a profession that would give you stability. See? She splashed her hands. You don't even realize it now. Life isn't just about stability and practicality. It's beauty, culture, art. And you found it all in Daniel, I finished for her. Yes, she didn't deny it. Daniel showed me a world you don't even know about. He taught me to appreciate the beautiful, to think bigger, to see things in perspective. And for that, he got a Lexus. Don't oversimplify, she grumbled. It was a token of appreciation for everything he'd done for us. What have I done for you, Vivian? I asked. Don't I deserve a thank you? She was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. I understand, I said at last. You think a father like me is not worthy of such a gift. I didn't say that, she said, but without conviction. You don't need words, I shook my head. Your actions speak louder. We stood opposite each other, separated not only by the distance of a few steps, but by a gulf of incomprehension that seemed to widen with every word. You know what? I suddenly felt tired. Maybe you're right. Maybe it really is time for me to let go of the past. This house, these memories. Maybe it's time to move on. Vivian looked at me warily. What do you mean? I'm going to sell the house. She blinked, clearly not expecting this. Daddy, I don't want you to make these decisions on emotion. No. I held up my hand, stopping her. You and Neil are right. This house is too big for me. I'll find something smaller, more suitable for a lonely old man. We can help you look, Vivian said quickly, something like greed flashing in her eyes. Neil knows a great realtor. I'm sure he does, I said dryly, but I can do this on my own. Dad, are you sure? This is a big decision. Maybe you should think about it. I've already thought about it, I interrupted, and I've decided. The house will be sold. She nodded, trying to hide her relief and joy. Good. If you need help, we're always— I think you should go. I glanced at my watch. You said you didn't have much time. Vivian hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave when the conversation took such an unexpected turn. Maybe I could stay a little longer? We could discuss the details of— Details of what? I asked. The sale? The distribution of the money? Don't worry, Vivian. I'll handle everything myself. She frowned. Daddy, I just want to help. You don't have to do everything alone. How did you help Daniel pick out Alexis? I couldn't help but be sarcastic. Thank you, but I prefer to do things on my own. Her face flashed again. You're insufferable. We're trying to do what's best, and you take everything personally. What's best? For whom, Vivian? For me or for you? We were on opposite sides of the barricade again. I could see her struggling with herself, trying to hold back her anger and maintain a semblance of concern. You know what? She finally said it. Do whatever you want. Sell the house, move, whatever. But don't come complaining later when you're alone in a strange place. I'm already alone, I said quietly. A long time ago. She gave me a long look, then turned and walked toward the door. She stopped on the threshold. I'll call you one of these days to see how things are going with the sale. And she left without even saying goodbye. I was alone in the living room staring at the closed door. A strange calmness swept over me. The decision had been made, and it felt right despite the circumstances that had led to it. Yes, I would sell the house, but not in the way Vivian had expected, not the way she and Neil and Daniel had planned. I made my way to my office, turned on my computer, and opened a search engine. Top realtors in Toledo, I typed in. It was time to take charge of the situation. The next morning I called Mallory Court, a realtor with an impressive track record of sales in high-end real estate. We set up an appointment for the same day. Mallory turned out to be an energetic woman in her 50s with a tenacious eye and business acumen. She walked around the house taking notes and photographs. Mr. Barrows, your villa is a real gem, she said when she was finished. Great location, beautiful architecture, well-maintained grounds. I'm sure we can find a buyer very quickly. How fast? With the right pricing and marketing strategy, probably within a month. I nodded. That's good. I want this to be done as quickly and confidential. Mallory raised an eyebrow. Confidential? Yes, I looked her straight in the eye. I don't want word of the sale to get out too widely, at least not initially. She nodded understandingly. Family circumstances? You could say that. Don't worry, Mr. Burrows. We'll proceed discreetly. The sale will be advertised only in closed databases for selected clients. We discussed the price, and it was even higher than I expected. The years since it was built had significantly increased the value of the land, and my continued investment in repairs and upgrades kept the house in excellent condition. What about a new home for you? Mallory asked. Have you looked at anything yet? Not yet, I admitted, but I'm open to suggestions. I have a few options that might work for you. She made a note in her notebook. I'll send you the information tonight. When she left, I sat in a chair in the living room looking out at the garden through the panoramic window. What am I doing? Am I really ready to part with the house that has been the center of my life for so many years? But the longer I thought, the more confident I became in my decision. This house, once filled with love and happiness, was now an occasion for strife, an object of greed. Maybe it really is time to let it go. But if I did, it would be on my terms, not the way Vivian, Neil, and Daniel had planned. After meeting with realtor Mallory Court, events began to unfold faster than I expected. The next day, she sent me a list of potential properties that I might be interested in as a new home. Most of them were small apartments in upscale neighborhoods or compact homes in gated senior communities. I put those suggestions aside. I had other plans. First, I needed to contact a lawyer. Edward Hines had been my lawyer since the days of active business. 70 years old, he was only 7 years younger than me, but he wasn't about to retire. "What am I going to do in retirement?" he used to say when I asked him that. "Sit at home and wait to die? No, I'd rather die at my desk with a pen in my hand." I called his office and made an appointment for the next day. Edward's secretary, hearing my name, immediately found a window in his busy schedule. "Mr. Hines will be glad to see you, Mr. Burroughs. Would tomorrow at 10 o'clock suit you?" When I entered the familiar downtown office, Edward rose to meet me with the same energetic smile I remembered from our first meeting 30 years ago. "Roger, what are you doing here?" He shook my hand firmly. "The last time I saw you, when you were making your will after Miriam died?" "Yeah, about then," I nodded, sitting down in the chair across from him. "I've decided to sell the house, Ed, and I need your advice." Edward raised his eyebrows. "Sell the house? That's a big decision. I thought you intended to live there for the rest of your life." "Plans have changed." I didn't go into the details of the family drama, but I want to do it a certain way. I outlined my plan to him. Edward's eyebrows rose higher as I spoke. "It's unconventional," he said when I was done, "but a legitimate one. Are you sure you want to go this route?" "Absolutely," I nodded. "Vivian made it clear a long time ago that she wanted my money, not me. Well, she'll learn her lesson." Edward tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "We'll need a few documents for that. First, a new will. Second, perhaps we should consider an annuity." "An annuity?" I interjected. "Yes, it's a financial instrument that guarantees you a regular income for the rest of your life," Edward began to explain. "You put in a large sum of money, and the insurance company pays you monthly installments. The main advantage is that when you die, the balance of the money doesn't go to your heirs, it stays with the insurance company." I smiled. This was exactly what I needed. It sounded perfect. "Tell me more about it." We spent the next hour discussing the details of the plan. I decided to sell the house, invest some of the money in a new, more modest home for myself, and put the bulk of it into an annuity. In this way, I would ensure a comfortable life for the rest of my life, but after my death, Vivian would not receive a dime of the money from the sale of the house. "That's harsh, Roger," Edward said when we had finished. "Are you sure you won't regret it?" I wondered. Yes, maybe it was cruel. But wasn't it cruel the way Vivian had treated me all these years? Wasn't it cruel to buy an expensive car for my father-in-law while trying to get my own father to sell the house? "I'm sure," I answered firmly. "Get the paperwork ready." "Okay," Edward nodded. "But keep in mind that as soon as Vivian and Neil find out about the sale, they might try to intervene. Are you ready for that?" "More than ready," I grinned. "I expect it." On the way home, I reflected on my conversation with Edward. What had led me to such a drastic decision? When had my relationship with my only daughter turned into a cold war over assets? I remembered Vivian as a child and inquisitive, bright girl with a sharp mind and a warm smile. She loved it when I would take her to construction sites where, wearing a little helmet, she would watch with delight as the buildings grew. "Daddy, when I grow up, I'm going to build houses too," she would say, sitting on my shoulders. What happened to that little girl? When did she turn into a cold, calculating woman for whom material values became more important than family ties? Maybe it was my own fault. I was always working hard, often absent from home. Miriam did most of the parenting while I built my business. I was providing for the family, but perhaps I wasn't giving enough of what was more important than money: time, attention, emotional support. When Vivian went to college, she didn't choose engineering as I had hoped, but art history. I was disappointed and probably didn't hide it. Miriam said to me then, "Roger, she's looking for herself. Give her space." I obeyed and paid for her education, even though I thought it was impractical. And then came Neil, a graduate of a prestigious business school, ambitious, with impeccable manners and connections. Vivian fell in love, and I couldn't help but notice how she began to change, adjusting to his world. She became interested in art, classical music, wines, all the things Neil and his family valued. I remembered their wedding, a lavish event where I felt like an outsider among the elegant guests discussing the latest exhibitions and opera productions. Daniel Fenton had made a brilliant speech, quoting Shakespeare and Plato, and my simple congratulations, sincere but without literary finesse, seemed to embarrass Vivian. From that day on, the gulf between us only grew. Every time we met, I felt Vivian assessing me through Fenton eyes and finding me insufficiently cultured, insufficiently refined. And when Olivia, my granddaughter, was born, I was almost removed from her upbringing. "Grandpa Daniel is teaching Olivia French," Vivian reported proudly, not noticing the pain in my eyes. Of course, there were bright moments. I'd helped them with the down payment on their house, financed Olivia's private school, and was always willing to support them financially. And they took that help for granted, never really thanking me. And then Miriam fell ill. The cancer was diagnosed at a late stage, and the next 3 years became an endless succession of hospitals, doctors, and medications. Vivian came rarely, always in a hurry, always with excuses about work, about Olivia's school, about other commitments. I didn't blame her. Seeing my mother in that condition was hard. But when Miriam died, and Vivian quickly returned to her life after the funeral, leaving me alone with an empty house and memories, something inside me snapped. And now this Lexus for Daniel. It was the last straw. Not the fact of the expensive gift, but what it symbolized. Vivian valued her father-in-law more than her father. She thought he was worthy of generosity, and I was not. I returned home with the firm intention of moving forward with the plan. The next day I called Mallory and gave the green light to sell the house. Events moved quickly. Mallory arranged several showings for select clients, and within a week I had 3 offers, all above the asking price. I chose the highest, from a couple from Chicago who were looking for a home for retirement. At the same time, Edward prepared the paperwork for an annuity and a new will in which I would leave a modest amount to Olivia for her education and the rest to charity. I also found a new place to live, a small but elegant 1-story house in a gated retirement community on the outskirts of town. It was 10 times smaller than my villa but had everything I needed, a comfortable layout, a small garden, and what I particularly liked, a terrace overlooking the lake. In all this time, Vivian hadn't called. I didn't contact her either, deciding to let things take their course. My plan had almost succeeded. I had already signed the preliminary agreement to sell the villa and put down a deposit on the new house when the thunder rumbled. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. I had just returned from my morning walk and was brewing coffee when the doorbell rang. Vivian stood on the doorstep, pale and anxious. "Papa, may I come in?" she asked without greeting. I stepped aside, letting her into the house. "What's wrong, Vivian? You look upset." She walked into the living room and turned to me. "Is it true?" she asked in a shaky voice. "Are you selling the house?" I nodded calmly. "Yes, it's true. But why?" She splashed her hands. "Why now? And why didn't you tell us?" "I thought you'd be glad," I answered, sitting down in the chair. "You and Neil have been saying for months that I should sell the house and move to something smaller." "Yeah, but," she stammered, "not like this. We were supposed to talk about it together, make a plan." "We already have a plan," I said. "The house is for sale. I found a new place to live. Everything is organized." Vivian sank down on the sofa, looking completely shocked. "Who's the buyer?" "A couple from Chicago. They offered a great price." "Where are you going to live?" "I bought a house in Sunset Hills." "In a retirement community?" She cringed. "Dad, you can't live there. It's like a nursing home, only with separate houses." "I liked it there," I answered calmly. "It's quiet, safe. There's a hobby club, a swimming pool, and a medical center nearby." Vivian wrung her hands nervously. "But what about the money from the sale?" You're going to get a huge amount. What are you going to do with it? There it was, the real cause of her anxiety. I have a plan for it. What kind of plan? She stepped forward. Dad, you have to consult with us. This is serious money and it needs to be invested properly. I've already made up my mind, Vivian, I said, and believe me, this money will be used wisely. But she was obviously choosing her words, but you'll leave a part of it for the inheritance, right? For Olivia's college. For what, Vivian? I looked her straight in the eye. Alexis for you when I'm 70. She turned even paler. Is that what you mean? Dad, you've got it all wrong. This was a special occasion. Daniel had done so much for us. And I didn't? She was silent, not knowing what to say. Look, I said, softening my tone, I don't blame you for appreciating Daniel. He's an educated, cultured man, and he's important to your family. But you've made it very clear to me that I don't deserve the same respect and generosity. That is not true, she exclaimed. I never said that. Maybe not explicitly, but I showed it by my actions. And you know what? I accepted it. I accepted that you and I would never be as close as you and Daniel, that you'll always think I'm not sophisticated enough, sophisticated for your new social circle. Vivian began to cry, quietly, restrained as always. Papa, please don't do this. Don't sell the house. Why not? I asked. Didn't you say it was too big for me? That I couldn't take care of it? Yes, but... She looked at me with pleading eyes. But this is our family home. I grew up here. I have so many memories. The ones you bring back once a month when you come here for an hour? She ignored my sarcasm. I always thought that someday, in the future, this house would be ours, that Olivia would be able to come here for vacations, that we'd keep it in the family. This is it. The truth, at last. She never worried that the house was too big for me or that I couldn't take care of it. She just considered it her future inheritance and worried that it was slipping out of her hands. Vivian, I said quietly, you never once said you wanted to keep the house for sentimental reasons. You've always said only that it was too big, too expensive to maintain, that I needed something smaller. I thought that was obvious, she sobbed. It's my childhood home. Of course I want to keep it. For yourself, I clarified. Not for me. She shook her head. No, Dad, you've got it all wrong. I'm really worried about you. This house, it's full of memories of Mom. I thought it would be easier for you in a new place. Don't pretend it was out of concern for me. I felt anger rising inside. You wanted me to sell the house while I could still sign the papers myself and give the money to you. For Olivia's college, for investments, for whatever. And now that I'm actually selling the house but am going to dispose of the money my own way, you suddenly remember sentimental value. Vivian jumped up from the sofa. That's not fair. You always see the worst in me. Am I not right? I asked. Tell me honestly, if I sold the house and gave you the money, would you be so upset? She was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. Daddy, she said at last, trying to pull herself together, I beg you, don't sell the villa. Let's find another solution. Neil and I could help with the upkeep, or even move here so you wouldn't be alone. I laughed. Vivian, I know you. You wouldn't trade your fancy house downtown for the suburbs, and you certainly don't want to live under the same roof as me. I'm just trying to find a compromise, she exclaimed. No, I shook my head. You're trying to maintain control of an asset you think is yours. But you know what? This is my house. I built it, I've lived in it, and I decide its fate. We stared at each other across the room, separated not only by physical distance, but by years of misunderstandings, resentments, unspoken feelings. What are you going to do with the money? Vivian finally asked in a low voice. It's none of your business, I answered. I'm a grown-up and I'm in charge of my own finances. Daddy, please don't do this. She came closer and took my hand. Don't sell the villa, it's our legacy, our family history. I looked at my daughter, a beautiful, successful woman who, for the first time in years, was showing some real emotion in talking to me. But was that emotion genuine? Or was it just panic at the thought of losing a potential inheritance? The decision has been made, Vivian, I said firmly. The contract's already signed. I'm moving out in a month. She let go of my hand and stepped back as if I'd hit her. You can't do this to us, she whispered. It's not fair. Unfair? I raised an eyebrow. Was it fair to treat me like an ATM machine for years and then give expensive cars to Daniel? That's not fair at all, she flared up. You're distorting everything. Am I? I shook my head. Vivian, I'm not blind or stupid. I can see how you and Neil feel about me, how you admire Daniel and his opinion, and how you disregard mine, how you come only when you need something. That's not true. She shook her head, but without conviction. It is, and we both know it, I sighed. Vivian, I love you. You're my daughter, but I won't let you continue to manipulate me. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher, a mixture of anger, pain, and perhaps realization. What do we do now? She finally asked. Accept reality, I replied. I sell the house and move. You go on with your life, and maybe we can find a way to communicate as adults without ulterior motives and manipulation. Vivian was silent for a long minute, then slowly shook her head. I can't believe you're doing this, she said quietly. After everything Neil and I have done for you. And what have you done, Vivian? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. We looked after you. We called. We visited. Once a month, I reminded her. And usually when you needed something. That's not fair. She was starting to get agitated again. We have our own lives, our own obligations. Of course, I nodded. And I'm not asking for more. I just want you to recognize the truth. You're more interested in my house and my money than you are in me. That's not true, she exclaimed, but there was a twinkle of guilt in her eyes. Then why are you here, Vivian? Is it not because you found out about the sale of the house? If it hadn't been for that, when would you have come again? In a month? 2? She didn't answer, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. Papa, don't sell the villa, she repeated quietly. Please. I shook my head. It's too late, Vivian. The decision has been made. She stood up abruptly. All right, do as you please, but don't come to me later when you realize you've made a mistake. I won't, I promised. You can be sure of that. She turned and walked quickly to the door. She stopped on the threshold and looked at me over her shoulder. I hope you know what you're doing, she said and walked out, slamming the door loudly. Moving day came sooner than I expected. 3 weeks passed in a flurry of activity, sorting through my belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind, meeting with Edward to sign the annuity papers, talking to the buyers of my house and the realtor. In all that time, Vivian hadn't called once. I hadn't dialed her number either. What could I say after our last conversation? However, on the 3rd day after her visit, Neil called me. The conversation was short and tense. Roger, he began in a formal tone, Vivian is very upset. I was hoping we could discuss the situation in a more rationally. What exactly do you want to discuss, Neil? I asked. The sale of the house, of course. Vivian thinks you're making a hasty decision. Perhaps if we all sat down and discussed the options. There are no options, Neil, I interrupted him. The house is sold. The papers are signed. There was a pause. I understand, he said finally. What about, the proceeds? That's it. The big question. I bought a new house and secured my income for the rest of my years. Through a will? I could clearly hear the hope in his voice. No, I answered. Through an annuity. Again the pause, longer this time. Annuity, Neil repeated slowly. You mean an insurance product that pays you an annuity for life but leaves nothing to your heirs? Exactly, I confirmed, impressed by his financial knowledge. A very practical solution for a man of my age. But, it means, he stammered, clearly hesitant to say so. That Vivian won't get the money? Yes, I finished for him. That's right. Roger, there was barely contained anger in his voice now. You're making a mistake. You're punishing your own daughter, your own family. No, Neil, I interrupted him. I'm making a rational financial decision that will provide me with a comfortable old age without having to depend on anyone. Isn't that what you and Vivian and Daniel wanted? For me to be rational and forward-thinking. You know that's not what we meant. His voice turned cold. What did you mean, Neil? That I should sell the house and give the money to you, or maybe buy a Lexus for Daniel? He inhaled sharply. I understand your position, Roger. I'm sorry it turned out this way. Me too, Neil. Believe me, so am I. That was the end of our conversation. On moving day, I was assisted by a company of professional movers. I took only the essentials with me: clothes, books, a few pieces of furniture I was particularly attached to, and of course, Miriam's photos and personal belongings that I couldn't leave behind. It was a strange feeling to leave the house I had lived in for over 30 years. Every corner, every room held memories. This is where Vivian took her first steps. Here Miriam and I spent our last happy days before her illness. Here I was alone after her death, trying to pick up the pieces of my life. I walked around the empty rooms one last time. In the bedroom where Miriam and I had once made our bed, there were now only footprints in the carpet. Vivian's room was clean and empty. No sign of the girl who had once pasted rock star posters on the walls. The living room, where we gathered as a family for Christmas and birthdays, was empty walls and silence. Mr. Barrows, we're ready to move out, the older loader interrupted my musings. Everything's loaded. I nodded, took one last look at the house and walked out, closing the door behind me. I had the keys in my pocket, which I was to hand over to the new owners the next day. My new home was a 3-hour drive from Toledo, in the small resort town of Lakeview. I had chosen this place for a reason. It was where Miriam and I had often spent weekends in the early years of our marriage. The town was located on the shores of a picturesque lake, surrounded by forests, and was famous for its mild climate. The house I bought was much smaller than the villa, but perfect for a single older man. It was single-story with 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen living room, and what particularly appealed to me, a large terrace overlooking the lake. There was a small manicured plot of land that didn't require much effort to maintain. A truckload of furniture arrived following my car. The movers quickly and professionally placed everything into rooms according to my instructions. By evening, the house was fully furnished, although many boxes still had to be unpacked. When I was alone, I went out on the terrace with a cup of coffee. The sun was setting over the lake, coloring the water a golden pink. A light breeze rustled in the crowns of the trees. The silence, broken only by the singing of birds, enveloped me, giving me a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I had made the right choice. This house, this town, this new life, it was the beginning of something new, not the end. My phone rang, snapping me out of my musings. Vivian's number. I hesitated for a second, then answered. Yes, Vivian. Daddy, her voice sounded strained. Have you moved in yet? Yes, today. How's the new place? It's fine, I answered honestly. You'd like it. Yeah, I could come see it, she suggested tentatively. Of course, I said. Whenever you want. There was a pause. Dad, I talked to our lawyer, she said finally, about the annuity. I smiled. Of course she'd consulted a lawyer, probably looking for ways to challenge my decision. And what did he say? That it was, final. That the money really can't be inherited. Yes, it is. Pause again. Daddy, why did you do that? There was genuine bewilderment in her voice. Do you really think we only want your money? Don't you? I asked her bluntly. Vivian, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not to discuss the house or the money or my will, but just because I'm your father. She was silent. That silence was more eloquent than any words. You see, I said softly, you don't even remember. That's not true, she objected, but without conviction. I called on Father's Day, which was 8 months ago, I pointed out. And you talked for 3 minutes because you were in a hurry to go to dinner at Daniel's. I have a lot of responsibilities, Dad. Work, family. I know, I interrupted her. And I don't blame you. Just admit the truth. I haven't been a priority in your life for years. I've been, a useful addition, a source of financial support, a potential inheritance. That's cruel, she exclaimed. Perhaps, I agreed. But isn't it true? Silence again. What do you want from me, Papa? She finally asked quietly. Nothing, Vivian, I answered. I don't expect you to suddenly treat me differently at 77 than you have for the last 20 years. I just want honesty. Honesty? She interjected. Yes. Admit that it's not that I sold the house that upsets you. It's that you won't get the money from the sale. That's not true, she objected. I'm worried about you being alone in a foreign city. I was alone in my own house, Vivian, I reminded her gently, and it didn't bother you much. She sobbed, and I realized she was crying. Daddy, please, she said through her tears. Let's not fight. I want to make things right. Fix what, Vivian? Our relationship. I know I've been, inattentive. I've been too caught up in my life, my problems. But I love you, Dad. I do. I sighed. I wish I could believe her. I wish I thought she was sincere. But I knew my daughter too well. Vivian, I said, I love you too. You are my only daughter and nothing will change that. But I also know that you're not calling me now because you've suddenly realized the value of our relationship. You're calling because you found out about the annuity. That's not fair, she exclaimed. I'm calling because I'm worried about you. Then prove it, I suggested. Come for a visit. No Neil, no talk of money or inheritance. Just you and me like father and daughter. The pause lengthened. Okay, she said at last. I'll come over. Next weekend. I'll be waiting, I said, not sure if she'd keep her promise. We said goodbye and I went back to watching the sunset. Talking to Vivian had left a bitter taste in my mouth. I wanted to believe she was sincere in her desire for a relationship, but years of disappointment had taught me caution. The next week was spent setting up the new house. I unpacked boxes, arranged books, hung pictures. The house was slowly becoming mine, taking on a personality. I also began to get to know my neighbors, mostly retirees like me. Many of them had moved here from big cities to spend a peaceful old age in nature. Some, like me, were widows or widowers. Others were couples who had spent 40 or 50 years together. To my surprise, I was quickly drawn into the social life of the village. There was a reading club, a group for morning walks, even a small orchestra that met once a week. I signed up for a chess club and discovered that several neighbors shared my interest in architectural history. When the weekend came, I wasn't sure if Vivian would come. But Saturday morning she called to say she was on her way and would be there in a couple hours. I made lunch, nothing fancy, just a roast, which I'd learned to cook pretty well over the years of being alone. I set the table on the terrace that overlooked the lake. Vivian arrived right on time. When she got out of the car, I noticed her looking around, assessing the village, the houses, the general atmosphere. Her face expressed a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Daddy, she hugged me, and I noticed that the hug was warmer than usual. It's so beautiful here. I didn't expect that it would be a decent place, I smiled. She looked embarrassed. No, I didn't realize it was so picturesque. I led her around the house, showing her the rooms, the new furniture, the view from the terrace. To my surprise, she seemed genuinely interested, asked questions, even complimented me on my choice. When we sat down to lunch, the conversation began to flow more freely. Vivian talked about work, about Olivia's recent progress at school. I shared my impressions of the new place, my neighbors, my plans for the future. Gradually, the atmosphere became less tense. We even laughed at a few shared memories from her childhood. After lunch, we went for a walk along the lake. The day was clear, sunny, and summer life was buzzing around us. Kids on bicycles, families on picnics, elderly couples on benches. "You know," Vivian said as we stopped by the water, "I haven't spent this much time with you in a long time." "Yeah," I agreed. "Since Mom died, we'd rarely seen each other for more than an hour." She nodded, looking at the water. "I want to apologize, Dad, for everything." I looked at her, surprised by those words. "For what exactly, Vivian?" She sighed. "For being so detached, for letting Daniel take such a big place in our lives, for—" She trailed off. "For making you feel like your money was more important than you were." I was amazed. Did she really understand? "Thank you," I said quietly. "It means a lot to me." "I really didn't realize how things looked from your side," she continued. "Neil and I had gotten so used to relying on Daniel for everything. He always knows what to say, what to do, and I think I've started to see the world through his eyes, including you." "And how do I look through that prism?" I asked. She looked away, like a stubborn old man who clings to the past and refuses to accept change. I nodded. "I see. But that's not true, Daddy," she added quickly. "You're not like that. You're just different. You have your own way, your own values, and I should have respected that, not tried to remake you into Daniel." We continued walking along the shore, and I pondered her words. Was she sincere? Or was she just trying to win my affection back after it was clear she wasn't going to get the money? "Vivian," I said at last, "I appreciate what you said, but I need to know, are you saying this because you really feel that way, or because you found out about the annuity?" She stopped and turned to me. "I understand why you're asking," she said quietly. "And I can't blame you for not trusting me. I haven't been a good daughter these past years." "You've been busy with your life," I shrugged. "That's normal." "No, it's not normal," she shook her head. "I had to make time for you, especially after Mom died. I knew it was hard for you, but I just didn't know how to help. And it was easier for me to keep my distance." I nodded. That sounded plausible. "As for the annuity," she continued, "yes, I was shocked when I found out. And yes, my first feeling was resentment, I suppose. The thought of you disinheriting us." "And now?" I asked. "Now I understand why you did it," she looked me straight in the eye. "You wanted to show me that I treated you wrong, that I valued your money more than I valued you. And is that true?" She was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "I suppose so. Not consciously, but that's how it worked." We continued our walk in silence. Vivian's words echoed in my head. Was this a real change of heart or just a skillful manipulation? I wanted to believe the best, but the years had taught me caution. When we got back to the house, the day was drawing toward evening. Vivian said she had to get back. Olivia had an important school event tomorrow, and she promised to help with the preparations. "Thanks for today, Daddy," she said, hugging me goodbye. "Yeah, I'd like to come more often." "I'd be glad to," I replied sincerely. As her car sped around the corner, I was alone on the terrace, looking out at the lake, colored by the fiery sunset. Memories, thoughts, feelings flashed through my mind. I didn't know if Vivian was sincere tonight. I didn't know if our relationship would change. But I knew one thing. I had made the right decision. By selling the villa and securing my independence through an annuity, I had freed myself from the ATM role that had been thrust upon me. Now, if Vivian wanted a relationship with me, it would be because of myself, not my money. I put the kettle on and pulled a cup, one of the few I'd brought from the old house, out of the cupboard. On it was a drawing Vivian had made as a child, a crooked house with smoke coming out of the chimney and figures representing our family. I remembered her proudly handing me that cup on Father's Day years ago. "This is our home, Daddy, and we're all happy in it." Maybe someday we'll find our way back to that simple happiness again. Maybe we won't. But I was ready for a new chapter of my life, free of illusions and toxic relationships. I looked at my new home, smaller than before, but cozy and completely mine. Here was no heavy weight of expectations, manipulation, ulterior motives. There was only silence, peace, and new possibilities here. I took a sip of tea and smiled.